rejoice in suffering. It sounds paradoxical, almost offensive, doesn't it? When faced with pain, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, the immediate, deeply human instinct is to resist, to escape, to numb, to pray desperately for it to stop. How could anyone, let alone saints and mystics deeply connected to God, suggest finding joy in the very thing that feels like it's breaking us? Is this some form of spiritual masochism, a denial of legitimate pain? Many of us wrestling with anxiety, doubt, or the general hardships of life encounter this challenging biblical concept and feel a disconnect. How can the mind, steeped in its narratives of fear and survival, possibly reconcile pain with purpose, let alone joy? Perhaps you've been there to receiving difficult news, and the mind immediately floods with stories of why me? And this is unfair, creating a layer of mental anguish on top of the initial shock. The very idea of rejoicing feels like a cruel joke. Yet woven through the depths of Christian mysticism and contemplative understanding is a profound reframing of suffering. It suggests that what the ego mind perceives as destruction, the soul recognizes as purification. Peace Beyond Thought invites us to explore this difficult terrain, not to glorify pain, but to understand why figures like St. John of the Cross saw the dark night not as God's abandonment, but as a crucial, albeit painful, path to deeper union and liberation from the illusions of the false self. Let's explore 3 reasons why this challenging perspective holds transformative power. The first reason is that pain disrupts the illusion, weakening the ego's grip. The ego, that constructed sense of I, built from thoughts, memories, roles, and attachments, thrives on predictability, control, and comfort. It builds a world based on its preferences, its narratives, its understanding of how things should be. Suffering in almost any form directly assaults this constructed reality. It shatters the illusion of control, confronts us with the unpredictable nature of life, and disrupts the familiar narratives the ego uses to define itself and feel secure. When things go wrong, loss, illness, failure, betrayal, the ego's identity feels threatened. The stories it tells itself, I am successful, I am in control, are exposed as fragile constructs. This can feel terrifying, like a personal annihilation. But from the perspective of awareness, this isn't the death of you. It's the potential death of the false self, the egoic identity you mistakenly believed was you. Suffering forces a confrontation with the question, who am I beyond these circumstances? The intensity of suffering is often directly proportional to our resistance to the present reality. The ego fights against what is, labeling it as wrong, unfair, unbearable. This mental resistance, this non-acceptance, is the core of psychological suffering. Physical or emotional pain might be unavoidable, but the suffering often stems from the mind's narrative about the pain. Mystics understood that suffering, when met with resistance, magnifies. When met with acceptance, its grip begins to loosen. It forces us to see how much energy we expend fighting reality instead of resting in God's presence within reality. Because suffering dismantles the ego's illusion of control, it becomes a powerful, albeit often unwelcome, invitation to surrender. Not surrender to despair, but surrender of the need to understand, fix, or control everything. It pushes us beyond the limits of our own strength, creating an opening to rely on something deeper, the grace and presence of God. It's in the dark night, when the ego's usual strategies fail, that the soul might finally turn towards the true source of strength and peace. Therefore, the mystic sees suffering not merely as an affliction, but as a fierce grace that disrupts the ego's hypnotic hold, creating the necessary friction for awakening to a deeper reality beyond the mind's control. The second reason is that suffering purifies our attachments and reveals what is of true treasure. The egoic mind constantly seeks satisfaction and security in things that are inherently transient: possessions, status, relationships, physical comfort, even specific beliefs or outcomes. It attaches its sense of well-being to these external factors. Suffering often involves the loss or threatened loss of these very things. Christian tradition frequently uses the metaphor of a refining fire. Just as fire burns away impurities to reveal pure gold, suffering can burn away our attachments to the superficial, revealing what is of eternal value. When faced with significant loss or pain, the things that once seemed vitally important often lose their luster. We are forced to confront what truly sustains us when the external supports crumble. Is it money, status, or control? Or is it faith, presence, love, and connection to God? When our usual sources of comfort are removed or proven inadequate, suffering naturally turns our attention towards a deeper, more reliable source. It highlights the insufficiency of relying solely on the self or the world. This isn't punishment, it's an invitation to shift our foundation. Dependence on fleeting externals is replaced by a deeper reliance on God's unchanging presence and love. The psalmist often cries out from suffering, finding God in the midst of it, not just after it ends. This forced reliance builds a more authentic, resilient faith. Suffering has a way of cutting through the noise and clarifying what truly matters. In moments of crisis, the ego's superficial concerns fall away. We are confronted with fundamental questions about life, meaning, love, and eternity. This process clarifies our true values, often revealing a deeper longing for connection, compassion, and spiritual truth that was previously obscured by the pursuit of worldly comfort. It reorients the heart towards what is lasting. The mystics saw this purification not as a harsh judgment, but as a necessary and ultimately loving process. It strips away the illusions that prevent us from experiencing the fullness of God's presence. The pain is often the pain of the ego letting go of what it mistakenly believed was essential for its survival. The third reason is that suffering breaks open the heart to a deeper reality. While the ego resists suffering, seeing it only as a threat, the soul, the awareness, the true self, recognizes it as a potential doorway. Intense experiences have the power to shock us out of habitual, unconscious thought patterns and bring us forcefully into the present moment. The sheer intensity of pain can sometimes override the mind's usual chatter. In moments of acute suffering, past regrets and future worries can momentarily dissolve, leaving only the raw, immediate experience of the now. While difficult, this can be a powerful form of mindfulness, breaking the spell of mental abstraction. It forces a confrontation with reality as it is, rather than how the mind imagines it. Experiencing suffering firsthand also fosters deep empathy. When you have known profound pain, you connect with others experiencing similar struggles on a level that transcends pity. This shared vulnerability is a cornerstone of authentic human connection and Christian compassion. As Richard Rohr suggests, our wounds can become sacred wounds, sources of connection rather than isolation. Finally, suffering reveals strength in vulnerability. The ego equates vulnerability with weakness. Suffering shatters this facade. Yet paradoxically, it is often in acknowledging this vulnerability, in surrendering the illusion of self-sufficiency, that we discover a deeper divine strength. Trusting God through weakness, rather than trying to overcome it alone, reveals the power made perfect in weakness. This fosters humility and opens the heart to grace. The Christian mystics didn't seek out suffering, but when it arrived, they understood its potential to act as a catalyst for profound spiritual opening. It breaks the ego's defenses, purifies the heart's attachments, and forces awareness into the raw reality of the present moment, where compassion is born and God's strength is revealed, not in the absence of pain, but in the presence found within it. The call to rejoice in suffering remains one of the most challenging invitations of the Christian path. It runs counter to every instinct of the ego mind. Yet, understanding suffering through the lens of Christian mysticism and awareness reveals a profound truth. Pain is not the enemy, and suffering is not necessarily punishment. It is often the very friction needed to polish the soul, the fire that burns away illusion, the pressure that breaks open the heart to deeper realities. When faced with hardship, the choice is often between resisting reality, which creates immense mental anguish, and surrendering to the process, which allows for purification, transformation, and the discovery of peace within the storm. Seeing suffering as the ego's undoing, as a refining fire, and as an opening to presence shifts the entire experience. It doesn't eliminate pain, but it transforms suffering, the mental resistance to pain, into a pathway for spiritual renewal. This requires immense faith, doubting the mind's fearful narratives and trusting in a divine purpose, unfolding even within difficulty. It requires awareness, noticing the ego's resistance without identifying with it. And it requires surrender, letting go of the need to understand or control, and resting in God's grace. This is the path the mystics walked, finding not an absence of darkness, but an unshakable light within it. If this reflection helped you find even a moment of stillness, subscribe for more weekly guidance from Peace Beyond Thought. And if you feel called to go deeper, you can explore our resources at peacebeyondthought.com. Remember, doubt your thoughts. Trust the stillness. Peace is already yours.